All right, so now I am still color correcting. I was working on the tail. That's where I left off. And the last thing I need to do for the tail is the hue saturation, just because it looks a little pink. So this can help that. I can push it back into its kind of yellowish form, and then I can either saturate it or desaturate it. I don't want to use lightness on this because that's better done with levels. And in fact, it is still a little too bright, so I am going to go back to levels. And I'm just going to darken its midtones a little bit and limit its highlights. Just a tiny bit. Okay. What's behind that? It's the spines on the back. So it's right there that really matters. So I'm going to focus on that area, and this needs quite a bit of adjustment with direct adjustment. So first levels, I need to make it quite a bit darker. Limit the highlights a little. Then I need to go to color balance. And I think I need to warm it up, especially in the reds. There we go. But then put some blues back in the shadow so it doesn't look too flat. And put some warms back in the highlights. And then hue saturation. Play with the spectrum color. And desaturate a little bit. All right, now I can get to blending this body from the top back. So I've got these legs. I'm not going to worry about trimming out the outside edges, but what I'm going to do is work on the internal edges, right? Blending those, and then worry about the outside external edges later. So to blend them, we start with just our soft eraser. I already got rid of a lot of the hard edges, so now I'm working with soft edged eraser at a lower opacity, even into the 20s. To kind of reveal these structures, I want to get that full wing in there. And then let these colors blend into each other. Because even when the feather colors don't match, we want the textures and those colors to kind of overlap to help with the blending. We can use dodge tool later, we can use dodge and burn, we can use sponge, but this helps at the seams the most. Okay, so now you can just see what that erasing did. Do it in my history to transition that. Now I go to the next. And this is actually where it overlaps with the head. So I need to go back to the head and where the head seam is. And now I am going to erase away from those feathers to let those blend in. I don't just erase kind of clumsily everywhere. There's going to be some hard edges where certain feathers fall. But if I'm at a really low opacity, I can even bring a little bit of that color in, even on those opaque feathers. And it's nice to use a tablet here so you're not always just filling up that same whole circle. Like you can press harder and fill it more. And because I'm at a low opacity, obviously if I want to take away more, I just keep hitting the same spot. And reveal that wing. Blend in these feathers. Okay. Now, I also have to do it with the tail. Now the tail has hard edges, so I have to go to 100% opacity first with my soft edged eraser. And get rid of that hard edge, especially because we're blending soft feathers into soft feathers. And once you've softened that hard edge, then we can go to a low opacity and we blend again. Now, you might not have enough overlap to blend it all the way you want. So if I erase too much, I'm going to reveal the eye of that reference. So we're going to learn a technique called clone stamping where we can carry some of these textures further and patch it in. But that's about the best I can do right now. And I'm actually a little curious if I can change the lighting. You see how the lighting on this chick's head is like from underneath, and that doesn't work for the tail. So maybe I can, I'll make a duplicate to try this out. Always safe to play with duplicate. And I can transform it. And if I flip it vertically, so I can get the shadow on the bottom, right? And then maybe warp it to get the shape I want. That lighting is going to make a little bit more sense. And I think it will. But then I have an outside edge I've got to play with right here. So I'll take care of that. Now because this is soft, feathery, fluffy, I'm using a 1 pixel feather, but I'm really making a jagged selection here. So I can bite away at it like so and soften it as I go. Okay. And now I can go back to this and blend it. And sometimes I rush and it never works to rush. Always looks sloppy. That's why we have a history and a Command Z. Okay, now, what's the next layer down? It's the quills. And there's not a whole lot of blending with the quills because they are behind everything else. But I could blend the tail's edge and let the quills come through a little bit because they're overlapping, like so. So again, it's important to get all of your colors and values to be similar first. And then I can do some internal compositing like I did for the feathers at the top of the head because these quills are really sharp, hard-edged, and they're floating above. And I can grab that from the quills, duplicate it, move it up above the tail, right? But down below the wing. And then take my lasso, select a few of these quills without the green showing behind. Nature's green screen. And then with the 1 pixel feather, delete, 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 delete. And there we have something to work with. All right, now, that same internal compositing, I'll just show you a really simple technique. I don't want that eye on the chick, so what can I do? I can grab a piece of the shadow from the chick on that layer, duplicate it. So now that selection is floating, move that up above, Command T, stretch it out. Make it a little bit bigger than I need, right? And then just like we were blending, I would use 100% eraser to blend that hard edge. And you see, that's a little patch. Covers up the eye. It comes right from the same layer. And we're going to be learning a tool for that as well. If I wanted to extend that, I can duplicate that again, and I can do Command T, and I can stretch that to be a shadow on the whole tail between the body and the tail, right? And then I can soften out that edge, and now I take a low opacity eraser and I blend it. So these are internal compositing techniques. Now I grew it so much that it's starting to look a little soft, but that can be worked with too. But you see how that shadow really helps to sell the illusion of that being the tail. Okay, save my work. So now what do I need to do? I need to trim the outside edge. So now all the pieces of the car have been welded together and built. The head, but the head I've trimmed out the outside. I've kind of polished it, painted it, waxed it, cleaned it up. There's maybe little things I might trim at the very end, like washing the car before you sell it. But now the body still has all this rough stuff around it. So with the head turned on, so I don't do anything I don't need to do in terms of overlap, now I need to trim out the body. And I'm going to do this a slightly different way because the body is not as important as the head, right? So what I'm going to do is duplicate that folder of the body, turn off the multi-layered folder underneath, and then merge by right-clicking on that group, merge that group into one layer. This allows me just not to have to skip between layers, to only see what's visible, to use my 1 pixel feather, and then just go in and trim the edges. Where it's smooth, it's easy. Remember that 1 pixel feather is biting away at it and softening that out. Still giving me a pretty crisp edge because these are foreground elements. Now where we get some textures like the feathers, I have to be a little bit more subjective in how bumpy I want to get, how spiky, how furry. And it's always easier to start with a hard edge and then soften it later. You do not want to use a soft-edged eraser because you want to preserve these crisp edges around your creature element. Because figurative assets need to be all in focus and all evenly lit so they can work in a variety of environments. You can always take focus away, you can always take lighting away, but you have a very hard time adding it. So don't take it away when you don't need to. Even these little downy kind of feathers. Really helps to have a tablet doing this. It's a little bit harder with the trackpad or a mouse. Those tablets are open at the back. We'll keep building our comfort level with them. And I do it in chunks, just like this. But it's nice to have them all combined into one layer. Because sometimes multiple layers are giving you your edge. And then you have to trim from each of them, which is annoying. And I'm only zoomed in. I'm not even at 100%. And I don't need to be because I can see the edge clearly enough. The head is more important. So the head, I kind of trim it in its sections. And remember, you can always add to your selection if you slip up. You can hold down Shift to add to it, Option to take away. And you can always do it in steps like this. So if I want to take away from this back claw a little bit, because that got warped out to kind of a weird shape as I was posing this leg, then I can carve it out there. And even though this shadow under the foot's very helpful, I don't want the shadow, I just want the foot. Little toenails. And that's why having good reference of feet is very helpful, especially when we bring this into a new environment. I can put rocks between the toes, I can put grass between the toes, I can put sand between the toes. But if I don't have a good clean edge, then I'm limited. Okay, so I've got that trimmed out. Got to trim this, which I think comes from that porcupine layer. Yep. Now, let's continue.